Welcome everyone to History Gone Wilder, part of Half History Will Travel. I am your host, the Wilder Historian, and as we move into Longstreet's post-war life, I will be covering it as thoroughly as possible, but there is a new Longstreet biography coming out at the end of the year, so I will cover it for the time being, but I will amend the post-war years because this new book is supposed to have more information. So don't worry if this post-war year seems a little short, I am waiting for that new book. In the following video, you will hear me refer to a servant named Jim. Longstreet's biographers don't clarify if he was a slave or an actual servant. I hope that this new book clarifies things. Longstreet and Gorey traveled to Lynchburg to join Louise and the children there. They remained at the Virginia town until June. On May 31st, Louise gave birth to their 8th child, a boy that they named James Jr. Their 4th son had also been named James Jr., but he had passed away on January 26, 1862 from scarlet fever. Longstreet, his son Garland, Tom Gorey, and a servant named Jim started south on June 28th, passing through the Carolinas. Longstreet rode in an ambulance driven by Jim. They stayed at homes along the way that could make room for the travelers, and their host provided them with what food they could. By mid-July, the party arrived at Longstreet's brother's home in Cleveland, Georgia. When they continued on their journey on July 31st, Longstreet's brother William joined them. Soon after leaving William's home, Tom Gorey left the group and headed straight for Texas. The group traveled to Canton, Mississippi, where James and William's sister Sarah lived with her husband, Judge Charles Ames. While in Mississippi, Longstreet, quote, discharged his family servants, then headed south to Mobile, Alabama, where the party got on a steamer to New Orleans. The South's largest city offered opportunities, and many Confederates relocated there, including John Bell Hood, Simon Bolivar Buckner, John Magruder, and Cadmus Wilcox. 2 former members of the Washington Artillery, Edward and William Owen, returned to New Orleans after their time in the war and started a cotton brokerage firm and asked Longstreet to join them as a partner. Longstreet accepted the offer. At the end of October, Longstreet went back to Lynchburg by train. While there, he put in his application for a pardon from the United States government, as described in President Andrew Johnson's proclamation on May 29th. Longstreet traveled to Washington, D.C., met with his old friend, General-in-Chief Ulysses S. Grant, and the Secretary of War Edwin Stanton, and Grant agreed to write a letter to Johnson on Longstreet's behalf for a pardon. When Longstreet met with Johnson asking for a pardon, the President refused, saying, "There are 3 persons of the South who can never receive amnesty: Mr. Davis, General Lee, and yourself. You have given the Union cause too much trouble." Longstreet was now void of political rights. The Longstreets made it to New Orleans by Christmas, and on New Year's Day 1866, the cotton brokerage firm of Longstreet, Owen and Company opened its office at 37 Union Street. Longstreet wrote to his old commander, Robert E. Lee, telling him of his business, including his business card. Lee would write back saying, "I know you will do your work well, wishing you all happiness and prosperity." Longstreet spent much of 1866 traveling around Mississippi, Alabama, and Louisiana procuring cotton for the firm. He even wrote to Gorey that he would give him $1 commission on every good bale of cotton he could procure from Texas. Louise, Robert Lee, and James Jr. stayed in New Orleans on these long trips. Garland, the oldest, began attending the Virginia Military Institute in Lexington, Virginia. Longstreet expanded his economic reach by becoming the president of the Great Southern and Western Fire, Marine, and Accident Insurance Company and the Southern Hospital Association. During the years right after the end of the Civil War, he attempted to expand into the railroad business, but his ventures in that type of industry didn't yield him any additional income. The end of the Civil War brought heated debate in Washington, D.C. and over the whole country about how to deal with ex-confederates and how to secure rights for African Americans in the South. In March 1867, Congress passed Reconstruction Acts that divided the former Confederacy into military districts and forced the states to write up a new constitution guaranteeing African American civil rights. Since the end of the war, Longstreet both publicly and privately advocated for moderation, forbearance, and submission. When a New Orleans newspaper asked for his response to the new legislation, he responded with a letter. "We are a conquered people," Longstreet wrote. "Southerners must recognize this fact fairly and squarely, with but one course left for wise men to pursue, and that is to accept the terms that are now offered by the conquerors. If the constitutional government shall be reestablished, the only course of action for Southerners is to comply with the requirements of the recent congressional legislation. He dismissed the idea that the representative men of a great nation could make such a pledge of membership in Congress in bad faith. He concluded, "Let us accept terms as we are in duty bound to do, and if there is a lack of good faith, let it be upon others." Republicans praised Longstreet's view, and in May 1867, Longstreet attended a meeting where Pennsylvania Congressman W.D. Pig Iron Kelly and Massachusetts Senator Henry Wilson argued for compliance with the acts. This only fanned the flames of discontent with the acts, and the legislature denounced them, sparking political unrest. In a private letter, he explained his views. "My politics is to save the little that is left of us, and go to work to improve that little as best as we may." As to black suffrage, he argued, "It is all important that we should exercise such influence over that vote as to prevent it being injurious to us, and we can only do that as Republicans. As there is no principle or issue now that should keep us from the Republican Party, it seems to me that our duty to ourselves and to all our friends requires that our party, South, should seek an alliance with the Republican Party. If the whites won't do this, the thing will be done by the blacks, and we shall be set aside if not expatriated. It then seems plain to me that we should do the work ourselves, and have it white instead of black, and have our best men in public office." When the idea of violence came up as a way to challenge the political landscape, he stated, "I think that the time has come for peace, and I am not willing to lose more blood or means in procuring it. If there are any in the country inclined to fight the question, I hope not to be included in that number. I shall not abuse them for their views, and I hope that they will not deny me the right to withdraw from the contest." Longstreet wanted to make a public vow of cooperation with the Republicans. His business partner, William Owen, advised against it. John Bell Hood read the letter and stated, "They will crucify you," and his uncle Augustus said, "It will ruin you, son, if you publish it." Longstreet was undeterred by his friends' comments. Generally, Northern newspapers praised the expression of cooperation. Southerners balked at the idea of cooperating with the political party, which had prosecuted the war against them and advocated for civil rights for African Americans. Most newspapers glossed over Longstreet's insistence that by linking up with the Republican Party that they can control the black vote, except for the black newspapers who saw this statement as an indication that former Confederates may use the Republican Party to suppress their vote. The South began to label him a traitor, but Longstreet didn't understand the reaction. As he later wrote to Tom Gorey, "I was anxious to keep the South out of the troubles that she has passed through since, and that was about the extent of my interest in the affairs of the state. For my pains I had nothing of good from them, or even appreciative expressions of sentiment."